Air New Zealand has today dropped its no jab, no fly policy for international travellers. It comes as New Zealand opened its borders to the world this morning. But for many, it's been a real struggle to book flights to and from Australia. So why is this? Air New Zealand Chief Executive Greg Foran joins us this morning. Greg, the Tourism Minister was positively fizzing this morning. Do you echo that sentiment about our borders opening to international tourists?
We certainly are excited. It's terrific after 767 days to be able to welcome back visitors from the visa waiver countries. So we are excited to be able to be getting to this stage. And
are you satisfied your staffing levels are up and able to cope with the influx of numbers?
Look, I think like most airlines around the world, it's actually quite challenging restarting after the best part of 800 days of being locked down to some extent. So, there are opportunities for us to always improve, and we're focusing on those. But, I'm very proud of the way that all the Air New Zealand team, all 9,000 of them, have got behind this. And, I think we've done a pretty good job over the last month or so getting Australia back up and running, and then, of course, these flights in today.
You mentioned room to improve. Are those staffing levels having an impact on capacity for flights to and from Australia?
For sure. We're not operating at the same levels we were pre-COVID across the Tasman. We really only got 4 weeks' notice of that happening in terms of people being able to enter New Zealand without having to do any isolation. And it takes a bit longer than that to restart an airline, to get people trained up, to ensure that you've got all the pieces of the jigsaw coming together. So capacity isn't running at what it was, but it's gradually increasing. And, we're able to get customers, by and large, where they needed to get to on time with everything intact.
Just taking a look very randomly at times and prices. So I looked at, in a month's time, for one adult to go across the Tasman return, you're looking at, for a very basic of fare with no entertainment or food, $1,000 per adult. When do you see those prices coming down? Or could I hasten to suggest, because capacity being kept tight to give you the ability to charge those prices?
The challenge with pricing on airlines is it always depends what particular flight you're booking and what time you're booking and how many seats are available on that plane. So we're not seeing fares anywhere near that amount. Our fares generally have moved from sort of the 350s to the 450s on average, but I do appreciate that some customers for a seat and bag could be paying as much as $750 if it's effectively the last flight that's available.
Right.
And that's on a A320.
Okay, so you're saying what I looked at must have been because there's just actually hardly any flights or seats available
on that particular flight. So generally, we're very cognizant of keeping our pricing very reasonable, and that's something that we look at and chat about every single day. Of course, we're dealing with input costs that are going up just the same way that, many businesses are around the world. And of course, fuel's a decent part of our costs, and we've seen that almost double. So we can't absorb all of those costs. We have to pass some on. And there is no doubt that we're not flying quite as much as what we were as we begin to ramp up, and actually nor are our competitors. But we're very cognizant of ensuring good value for customers.
So if a customer was perhaps looking to travel later on this year, can they expect that prices will decrease as those pressures decrease?
Yes, I think that they will. I think as more airlines start to get their capacity up, not just on the Tasman, but across routes, I think you'll naturally see pricing will come down. Very hard to predict what will happen with the price of fuel at this stage. As I said, hasn't quite doubled, but it almost has. That will depend on factors sort of beyond New Zealand's control. But let's see how that works out. It's a competitive industry, and as more competition starts to get up and running, and as prices get a little bit more, regulated in terms of input costs, then I think we will see pricing come down.
Talking about your competitors, the boss of Emirates here in New Zealand has reportedly said that pre-departure tests are really impacting their ability or their desire to increase capacity to New Zealand, because in Australia they don't have pre-departure tests over there, so they're really focusing on that market. Is it the same for Air New Zealand, that capacity won't increase until pre-departure testing has been removed?
I don't think it's quite as clear-cut as saying that pre-departure tests is a complete handbrake on people travelling. We're seeing people certainly very keen to get out and travel and reconnect with family and friends. But there's no doubt that it does add some friction. And that friction is both a inconvenience of having to get something else completed before you travel, and then obviously the cost. So, there is no doubt that at the right time, and this is a decision that the government will need to make, we'd much prefer that we didn't have pre-departure testing either, for countries that people are flying to. That's not in New Zealand's control, but definitely coming back into New Zealand, which is in our control.
So the Tourism Minister this morning, I asked, when will there be a date? Do you want to see at least a date in terms of your ability to plan?
Well, it certainly helps if we get one, but once again, that's a decision that, the government will take, and they'll consider all the various inputs that go into making that decision to make it right for New Zealanders.
But to clarify, you don't believe currently that there is a need for pre-departure testing, or you believe it should be removed?
I'm keen to see that removed from how people have to travel back into the country.
And just quickly, the testing trial that your airline is involved with, these are kind of rat tests that have PCR quality results. How are they going to be used?
Well, we're participating in a trial, working very closely with the Ministry of Health and MB, and we've been discussing this over the last couple of months. This LAMP test is a test which has, better quality than what you've got in a rapid antigen test, and not quite to the gold medal standard that you'll get in a PCR, but it's pretty good. One that can be administered, self-administered. You can do video proctoring to ensure, the accuracy of the individual taking it. So, I think what we've got here is another tool in the toolbox should we require it, and we're dealing with another significant pandemic. So I think it's a wonderful insurance policy. We're keen to be part of the trial to see how it plays out, and that's why we're participating.
Air New Zealand CEO Greg Foran, appreciate your time this morning. Thanks for being with us.
And if